A lot of women joined the abolitionist movement, mostly women from the Northeast, white women, although obviously some African American women like Sojourner Truth joined too. But there are two reasons why white women became reformers in the early 19th century. One is because they saw the changes and corruptions around them and believed that they could help as women, right? They saw themselves as more nurturing and motherly, and they believed they could bring those attributes into reform, especially into reforms such as anti-prostitution, temperance, things that were corrupting the family life. And the second reason is because they wanted to fight for the rights of others, right? And being a woman had nothing to do with it except for in the fight for women's rights. These are women who believed in freedom, so the reform is about changing those things that limit freedom, so literacy, slavery, and women's rights. Now, since the American Revolution, women were allowed in the public sphere in a way that they had been before, right? They still couldn't vote or hold office, but they were allowed to petition, attend meetings, march in parades, give lectures, and so they became active in reform in the ways that they could, right? They couldn't vote or hold office to create reform, but they could make a difference in things like temperance, building of asylums, by giving lectures, by attending meetings, by marching parades. And many got involved because of abolition. So women got involved in women's rights because of their initial interest in helping slaves. So while working for the rights of slaves, they became more aware of their own subordinate social and legal status. And they started to see themselves as slaves to their husbands. Now here are the Grimke sisters. They are two daughters of a prominent slaveholder in South Carolina, and they've converted to Quakerism, which is passive, and then they became abolitionists when they went to Philadelphia, which is obviously where there are a lot of Quakers initially resided. And when they become abolitionists, they start giving lectures on how horrible slavery is, and they're giving these lectures as, they saw slavery firsthand, they knew how horrible it was because they grew up with it, and so they start giving lectures from a very unique perspective, and they start getting an audience. Now, a lot of women, including the Grimke sisters, were publicly condemned for their actions, right? Many people saw women who went out to the public sphere like this as female monsters, as shamefully obtruding themselves upon the public, right? They were stepping out of a woman's place. Remember, we talked about the women's sphere. These women seemed to destroy female modesty, right? They throw gender relations out the window in a way that seemed very unbecoming to other people at the time. Here we have, this is an 1850s a cartoon in which you have a woman who's speaking up and she's being heckled by the peanut gallery, right? And so women who spoke up were constantly harassed, they were in many ways abused, and yet they saw this as their right to speak in public, to speak even while being heckled, that they would not stand down. And so, for instance, the Grimke sisters used their notoriety to increase public debate. So Sarah Grimke, one of the sisters, wrote a statement called Letters on the Equality of the Sexes in 1838, which called for equal rights and equal pay for equal work. And other women would write and say, how dare you step out of your prescribed role? The God designed men as superior and women as inferior. If you go back to sort of Adam and Eve, Eve was created from Adam, and yet Sarah and her sister just absolutely refuse to stand up and say, no, that's not how it works. In fact, in responding to that argument, Sarah Grimke responds, my doctrine is that whatever is morally right for a man to do is morally right for a woman to do. And so they seem to be challenging some of the Victorian morality of the age, the separate spheres, where men work outside, where women work inside, right? The idea that women are caregivers in the household, these women seem to be challenging that, but they're arguing, no, we are in many ways the caregivers of the world, and it is our job, our duty to step outside of our household to be the mothers of the world. Now, as women got involved in reforms such as temperance or abolitionism, they started becoming much more active, and they realized that they were, as women, being targeted, and so they started to think about women's activism. So in 1840, two abolitionist women, Elizabeth Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott attended the World Anti-Slavery Convention in London. They were abolitionist delegates of the convention, and they had been elected by their local anti-slavery society to attend this convention. But when they got to the convention, they were not allowed to be seated because they were women. And so they were appalled that even though they were sort of delegates, that because they were women, they were not allowed to go to the convention. So the two of them organized the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848. And they put up pamphlets around New York to come to Seneca Falls in upstate New York. And mostly local women came, about 500. And at this convention, they discussed women's rights, including suffrage, and they drafted the Seneca Falls Declaration of Sentiments, which is very similar to the Declaration of Independence. Now, the Declaration of Sentiments was modeled, as I said, on the Declaration of Independence, and so it started with the same way. We hold these truths to be self-evident, and it said that all men and women are created equal. And instead of blaming George III for usurping their rights, they blamed the history of mankind is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations on the part of man toward woman, having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over her. To make women free, women needed the right to vote. In a democratic society, only those with access to the ballot could be freed. And so this marks the beginning of a 70-year process to get women the right to vote. But this convention was mostly focused on women's access to education, employment, divorce, and control over their own property. So here they're saying, man has made her, if married, in the eye of the law, civilly dead. He's taken from her all right and property, even the wages she earns. He's denied her the facilities for obtaining a thorough education, all colleges being closed against her. He's endeavored in every way that he could to destroy her confidence in her own powers, to lessen her self-respect, and to make her willing to lead a dependent and abject life. Women do feel themselves aggrieved, oppressed, and fraudulently deprived of their most sacred rights. We insist that they have immediate admission to all the rights and privileges which belong to them as citizens of the United States. Now, only one woman who was at the Seneca Falls Convention was alive to actually cast her vote at the federal level in 1920. She was 18 in 1848, so she was about 90 years old when she was able to cast her vote. She was 89, but she was the only one out of the 500 that managed to live that long. Now, women, as they're getting involved in this movement, they start producing images that compare their situation to slavery. And they're aware of how marriage is a form of slavery, where women are tied to their husband/master who controls her earnings and her inheritance and her children. She does not have freedom over her own body. There's no